Sometimes it's the deals you don't make that make all the difference in the world. It might be the decision to break off a romantic relationship that opens your heart and your life to find the true love of your life. One of the best decisions I ever made was to turn down a job offer when I was 22 years old. I'm sure it could have been a good job, but a couple weeks later, I found an even better offer that sent me on an amazing journey that I still continue today. It's actually a skill to know when to break a deal, and it's a skill anyone can learn. Back in 1978, Don Schlitz told a story in song form of learning the art of deal making. The song was one of Johnny Cash's most famous. You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be enough time for counting when the dealing's done. You can listen to the full song and a much better version of the song in the show notes. We'll put a link to the official music video. And actually, I'd recommend listening to the song because it's a great lesson in deal making, just very similar to gambling. Another favorite line from this song: if you're gonna play the game, boy, you gotta learn to play it right. Hello and welcome to the Wealth Wisdom Financial Podcast. We believe when conventional financial thinking doesn't get you where you want to go, you need wealth wisdom. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Please also give us a like, and we'd love to hear your comments below. Now, today I want to talk about 5 skills that you could work on to get better at deal making and knowing when to stay in a deal, and more importantly, when to walk away from those negotiations. And I'm going to save the most important one for last. So stick with me here. Number 1 skill to help with knowing when to walk away from a deal, when to break the deal, is active listening. Deals can be made or lost depending on what your ears hear, right? You have to be paying attention, be listening. But the world's also full of fast talkers that bury the details, so that you don't get lost in them. Maybe they'd be malicious, maybe not. But then when those details aren't talked about or uncovered, they can lead to all kinds of problems later when they do eventually surface. So we want to work on our own, communication skills, communicate effectively the information that's needed for the deal. But we also want to demand clarity and effective communication from the other parties that are in the deal. And the way I think we do that best is by active listening, where we listen to what they're saying. We try to read between the lines a little bit if needed, repeat back to them to make sure we're understanding, especially if we are reading between the lines. Here's what I think I heard in between the lines. Is that true? And then ask them to confirm that you and them have the same understanding of the deal at hand. I kind of wonder if Bernie Madoff or FTX's Sam Bankman-Fried and people like them would have been able to pull off their schemes if other people on the side of the scheme had demanded effective communication and practiced active listening skills. So it's number 1, active listening. Number 2 is building rapport. This one is super critical for deals that create long-term relationships. You need to be able to establish trust and credibility with your collaborators, the other parties in the deal. If you're unable to secure faith in them, it's likely a sign that you need to walk away. You wouldn't sit at a gambling table with someone who could easily cheat. I've never gambled much, but I understand you wouldn't want to sit with somebody that has like long sleeves that are like baggy, because then they could hide cards up their sleeves. You just wouldn't sit at that table that person's sitting at. You'd walk away from that deal. So trust your instinct here a little bit, but also be careful if trust is kind of established too quickly. That's the trick of the snake oil salesman. They get you to trust them, and then you'll believe whatever they say, even if they are trying to sell you snake oil, right? Or something like that. So active listening, building rapport, checking those trust instincts, and so forth. And then the third one, which might be my favorite because I'm a little analytical, is to actually do the math. Analytical thinking is very important to evaluating deals. There are lots of variables that you could consider, and a good list of pros and cons can go a long way, right? If you're not super analytical, just make a list of all the pros, list of all the cons, get them on paper at arm's length from you, and you'll be much more likely to make a logical decision. Also taking into account your emotions, right? Don't want to discount those. But one of the best variables that you might see on that pros and cons list, and that I think is the best place to start with math, is the time value of money, right? Is the present value of the money that you're putting in worth the future value and the time that it takes to get there? How do you do those calculations? It's one of the most important things you can learn. And then you're able to determine, is the input worth the output over the time that it takes to achieve that output? Or for your required output, is how long is it going to take to achieve that given your input and the other parameters of the deal? What other options do you have for your money that you're going to put into the deal, and how did the output of those options compare to the output of the deal you're looking at, and so forth. If the math doesn't make sense, it's a really good indicator that it might be time to walk away from the deal. And don't ever forget, it's really, really, really hard, if not impossible, to change the math once the deal is done. So don't think, oh, I can just change this later. Chances are you wouldn't be able to. Okay, so we got active listening, building rapport, do the math. Now, number 4 and number 5 are going to sound a little contradictory, but remember that number 5 is what I believe is the most important. So take number 4 as like a sometimes thing, and a number 5 as a most of the time thing, okay? So number 4 is flexibility. Deal making often has twists and turns as the terms of the deal are negotiated. You want to know how adaptable you can be before you break off the deal. Then as you go, through those twists and turns of the deal, you can think on your feet, you can negotiate, you can pivot, find creative solutions within that range of flexibility. So if that you've predetermined. And if the other parties can't get into your range of flexibility, it's likely time to walk away from the deal. And then number 5, stick to your goals. You make deals first and foremost to reach your own goals and objectives. Know those goals, keep those interests in mind, your interests in mind, and identified they're there all the time. And if the deal turns into something that'll distract from your goals, it's likely time to break the deal and move on. So to reinforce these 5 skills, let's do an example. Let's say you're negotiating a sale. It could be a wholesale contract of your product. It could be a real estate sale. It could be the sale of your entire business. Pick whichever one jives with you, but you're the seller and the other party is the buyer. Okay. Now, before you start the sale, you'll want to clearly outline your goals and values for the sale. How much money do you want to make? What will that money allow you to do? Why are you selling? What is important about selling to you? When we were selling our first business, we didn't care too much about the money, right? We wanted some money from it, but it was more important that the mission continued. And whoever we were selling that business to continued the mission of it, and it could continue to be a generational type business. That was really important to us. We weren't going to sell to someone who was going to destroy that mission. So these goals and these values could be numbers, but they could also be things like that. Now, as you set your goals, you also want to analyze the market to see how you're priced within it, how you might position your offer so you can get a higher price than others in your market. You might consider, is based on what the market's doing right now, is this the best time to sell, or could waiting a while be worth the time? Or you might determine, I need to move really quickly because the market's changing and I want to get this deal done before the market shifts. So you kind of want to know that positioning and do that kind of analysis. And then you look at your goals, you look at your values, you look at that analysis, and then you ask yourself, how flexible are you willing to be? Are you willing to make more money? How about less? How much less would still allow you to do what you want to do with the proceeds from the sale? What would change about your why if you went to the low mark or to the high mark on your flexibility? What non-monetary things could make the sale not worth it or not important to you? Or maybe more important to you? Think about that flexibility. What's negotiable? What's not? Of the things that are negotiable, how negotiable are they? And then as you start to meet potential buyers and hear their offers, you're going to want to listen actively, get to know them personally, especially if you have some of those non-monetary values in the sale, right? You want to work with people that you can trust, that you know are going to, be doing what you have agreed to years from now, those kind of things. And you can get a sense of if the deal is working for you and for them. And as you negotiate and come to terms, right, you have your goals, your values, your analysis in mind. And you might even, especially if you've done some of that market research, be able to share what you learned there and communicate why you're asking for what you're asking and get them to move closer to where you are, because this is how you see the market and what you learned about it. And then what's cool about approaching it this way is that once you get to the final deal and it's negotiated, you're going to do your due diligence, make sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. It's often a lot easier because of that time that you put in to setting your goals and values, analyzing the deal you're looking for, and predetermining your flexibility, and then active listening and building the trust and all that. Now, it's worth mentioning that you don't want to stay in goal setting, analysis, flexibility determining phase for too long. If you get stuck in analysis paralysis, you never do a deal, and it's kind of pointless, right? To do all this work, to build your skills if you're going to get stuck there. Yet, I see way too many people not taking the time to set up their parameters for a deal prior to looking for people to make deals with. They might, real estate investors start perusing what houses are for sale before they determine what money do I have available to buy a house? What price am I going to look for? What kind of market do I, neighborhood do I want? Those kind of things. Now, we're huge believers in, before you start doing all of that, deciding what you want. I mean, if you don't know what you want, how will you know when you got it? So determining what you want is some of the most fruitful yet hardest work you can do. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging. In fact, I created a free 5-day journey that starts with determining what you want and then continues with helping you get clearer and clearer on what you want as you analyze how things go, right? You might set your goals before you start negotiating deals. And then as you might know the kind of house you want in the neighborhood you want it. And then you start looking and you might be like, ooh, that doesn't exist, right? Like Prince Charming doesn't exist. I need to adjust. How do you determine when to adjust and when to hold, right? Where you are. We talk a lot about that in this 5-day journey. It's called Curb the Chaos. And I'll put a link in the show notes or the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube, so you can get right in there and get started right away. So go ahead, click that link that's in the show notes to Curb the Chaos, a 5-day financial centering journey. And you can join it right now, get started, even if you're listening to this at 3 a.m. Then stay tuned, because in our next episode, we're going to talk about preparing your money for the next deal. We shared today about preparing your personal skills. Next time, we're going to talk about getting your funds together and ready to create awesome deals. How and where you prepare your money can make it super critical or can break how you use the skills we talked about today. And yes, properly designed life insurance can be a critical component of how you prepare the funds to be ready. So thanks for joining us. Appreciate you listening to this podcast. Be sure you hit that subscribe button so you get our future episodes. And I hope and pray that you live long and profit. Topics presented in this podcast are for general information only and not for the purposes of providing legal, accounting, or investment advice. On such matters, please consult a professional who knows your specific situation.